It is time now for Money Power Politics. And this evening, we are talking about our financial responsibility as a country. I want to level set here. This has been a problem for the United States for many years. Our debt has exploded over the last 2 decades under the leadership of both parties. But that makes it even more important to take a hard look at what this Republican bill would do to make an already bad situation even worse. As the New York Times puts it, this is one of the most expensive pieces of legislation in years and would put our country on a more perilous fiscal path. Look, I know that when we are talking about budgets and deficits, the numbers are so massive and so overwhelming, it is completely easy to tune out. But these numbers are going to impact all of our lives in really important ways. So I want you to keep these 3 things in mind. First, the national debt. Right now, it is a whopping $37 trillion. And this bill would add at least $3 trillion more over the next decade. That could mean higher interest rates for all of us. That means it's more expensive to borrow to buy a car or a new home or credit cards. But it also makes borrowing more expensive for the government. And right when we are just a few years away from running out of money to fund, you know it, Social Security and Medicare. Second, what is in the actual bill? Some people, especially the rich, would get tax breaks. But to pay for it, poorer Americans will lose some things. More than 10 million people will likely lose their health care. And third, while all of the rest of this is going on, the trade war, tariffs, will make inflation worse. And just today, Fed Chair Jay Powell said he would have cut interest rates had it not been for the trade war. Joining me now, Natasha Soren, former Treasury official and Yale Law professor, and David Gura, correspondent for Bloomberg and the host of the Big Take podcast. Natasha, you have said that the debt crisis is going to force America to make some very hard choices in the coming years. Explain what those choices are.
So I think what we are experiencing, as you laid out already, Stephanie, is we are on a fiscally unsustainable trajectory. And we're on that fiscally unsustainable trajectory when we are less than a decade out from not being able to pay out Social Security beneficiaries in full and Medicare recipients in full. And at that moment, the choice that Congress is making right now is to spend $3 trillion plus. It's actually $4 trillion if you count the higher interest costs associated with servicing that debt on this package that is moving very quickly through Congress. And I think it's really important to understand that $4 trillion, you might think, it's going to be dispersed across everyone and everyone's going to get something from this package. Actually, the bottom 40% is going to be worse off as a result of this bill. Their after-tax income is going to fall because they are going to lose health insurance, because they are going to lose access to food stamps to be able to put food on the table for their family. And so it's kind of striking that we have this piece of legislation that is going to cost trillions, going to put us even in more fiscally dangerous waters, and is doing so at a time when it is taking away health insurance from millions and making the lives of the bottom and middle-class Americans worse off, not better off.
Dave, explain why you think the average American should care more about our enormous national debt. Because if you said to people it was 37 trillion or 37 gazillion, they might say it's all the same to me. It's too much money, and the government doesn't work for me. But where does the rubber hit the road? Where and why should people care?
I think the rubber hits the road when the cost of borrowing goes up, as you said, for consumers and for the government as well. And I think that the great fear here is that what's going to go away is this confidence, this global confidence in the U.S., that if you lend money to the United States, there's going to be all but a guarantee that the U.S. pays you back. And so as we see this kind of spiral and spirals Natasha's laid out, seeds of doubt begin to get sown in the minds of investors and governments who don't see the U.S. in the same ways they saw them before. I mean, I think that what we're being encouraged to do here is look at all of this in a very short-term way, whether it has to do with kind of temporary tax breaks that are in here when it comes to no taxes on tips, when it comes to the kind of child tax credit being enlarged a little bit here. Again, these are kind of just extended for a couple of years. And really the kind of larger extension of the tax bill is going to have this larger effect that's going to cause all of these problems down the line. So, you mentioned Scott Bessent coming into this administration saying getting the fiscal house in order was his priority. There was this moment that didn't take place during the campaign, but certainly happened during the transition in the early days of this administration, where this became an issue that Republicans once again seemed to embrace. And in a way, Elon Musk kind of exemplified that. The rationale for a lot of these cuts was taking a hard look at government and making really difficult choices. Well, that, of course, didn't come to pass in the way that he and his DOJ colleagues promised. The cuts that they made were nowhere near the size of what they promised. And I think it kind of cheapened the promise that they made early on here that there was going to be an administration now in place that's going to take a serious look at these issues. If you look at this legislation, by no means is this doing anything to kind of, again, take a look at the fiscal house of state that it's in and make plans for the future.
But that's exactly why Elon Musk is so outspoken right now and turning on Trump, because his argument from the get-go has been about government spending. And that's what Scott Bessent's argument was, right? When we were going through this today and talking about the perilous fiscal path, I remember watching Scott Bessent speak when President Trump was running, when he was sort of gunning for this job, saying he wanted to be part of this administration because he was so panicked about the careless government spending happening under Joe Biden. And now this makes it worse. Yet earlier today, Scott Bessent was talking on Fox News defending this bill. Watch this.
This is a deal for working people, because what we have is President Trump's 2017 tax bill, and we are overlaying that with the president's campaign promises. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the lower tax on Social Security, and tax deductibility of American-made cars. Those sound like working-class tax breaks to me. I think we are going to see big acceleration here. And once you see the growth trajectory change to an upward bias, the bill more than pays for itself. We could be in surplus.
This bill's for working people? People where? People who work on Wall Street or the tech sector? Natasha, what is your take on Scott Bessent saying this is for the working people and it pays for itself?
Well, it's obviously not. And the way that we know that is we can look at the estimates that my colleagues and I at the Yale Budget Lab have done, which are in line with the estimates from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office and every other group that's looked at these questions. This bill does not come close to paying for itself. It is going to increase deficits by around $4 trillion. The only way for that not to be the case, and the choice that Congress has decided to make and the Trump administration has decided to make, is kind of try to do some magic math and say that because you're going to extend certain provisions that are already in law, you don't have to count the cost of those extensions. That's kind of like saying when you move into an apartment and you start paying rent, well, because you live there, you don't have to pay rent anymore. It doesn't really make any logical sense. And then if you look at who this bill is for, well, we've run the numbers on that as well. The bottom 40% of the distribution is going to be worse off. The bottom 10% is going to be $700 worse off annually as a result of this bill. The top 1% is going to get a $30,000 tax cut as a result of this bill. I think it's something like reverse Robin Hood legislation. It's the largest wealth transfer from the poor to the rich that we've seen in modern history.
And it's a reminder to our audience, there is no magic math. When the numbers don't add up, you get the answer wrong. I want to talk about Jay Powell before we go, though, Dave, because it was stunning to me, right? He defended his decision to wait and see on cutting rates, saying that the economy was in solid shape and they would have cut rates had it not been for the uncertainty of tariffs and the trade war ahead. I mean, that's pretty stunning to me.
Yeah, this was a meeting of major central bankers in Portugal. And when he said he was focused on doing his job, when he was asked about the president's criticisms of him and his intelligence and his capacity for the job, he said just focused on his job. He got a round of applause for saying that. So this was a crowd of colleagues that really welcomed him and certainly appreciated the trouble that he's been going through in recent months, given all that President Trump has said. But he delivered this kind of delicious response to the president, not directly, but he said, look, he and his colleagues on the FOMC, the board that sets interest rates, were all but ready to lower interest rates before Donald Trump came in and announced this sweeping trade policy. And once they did that, there was no alternative for this Fed than to sort of say, look, the economy's in pretty decent shape here. There's no real impetus for us to do that now, to do anything. Let's pause and see how all of this goes. And that's where you find the Federal Reserve today, despite what the president keeps saying about the Fed not acting or not putting rates where they should be. It's really in this waiting game that we're all in right now, just to see sort of what the effects of this kind of unprecedented and sweeping trade policy is going to be. And so at that conference today, he delivered that. And it was just kind of an astonishing line in confirmation of the fact that we are where we are because of what President Trump has done. And he, like the rest of us, is just trying to figure out where this is going to go next.